Okay, so our next session is about consciousness and music. We have two speakers. Our first speaker is Elaine Chu, and she is going to play the piano for us very kindly. And I got to some extent into this idea of creativity, at least, and creativity and consciousness, because I was just fascinated to know whether things like music and painting and writing a novel are creative and special, or whether they're just computational and a computer is going to spit them out in due course, and what's the point in learning the piano, because in 5 years' time a computer will do it better than me anyway. I want to know whether there's something special. And so Elaine is going to give us an experience of music and tell us something about what it's like to experience and create music if you're a conscious person, which we believe she is. And then Scott, I'm sorry, I should have learned how to pronounce your name. I'm now going to destroy it. Makeig. Not good. So that's always been my problem, being dyslexic. I find that sort of very difficult. So clearly I'm not a computer, otherwise I'd have been able to pronounce everything correctly. And he's going to do a mind over consciousness. And actually his title has morphed a little bit. He's going to show us and tell us about what happens when you image the brain with things like EEG, and you look at people who are engaged in the process of creating or listening to music, and what the sort of primitives of rhythm and pitch and sound and melody and all those sorts of things might do to us. So without further ado, let me have Elaine come up on stage and talk to us about music.
Thank you, James, for the very nice lead-up to my presentation. And I want to thank Stuart Hammeroff for the invitation to the Science of Consciousness and to have the opportunity to speak to you today. I named my talk Mind Over Music Perception because it's basically exploring the thinking behind music making. And whatever you read in the abstract, just ignore it. My talk has changed. Over the past few days, my ideas of consciousness has changed, and what my understanding of what it encompasses has also morphed, and so the talk has evolved, and it's now much broader than what it is in the abstract. I will talk a bit about three things: tonal structure, that's the first one; intention and attention as we're listening to music and making music; and time and space in music. So I'll start with tonal structure. I began, my career in this field began when I started thinking about tonality and how to model and explain it. Tonality is a very old concept, so it's not very new or fancy or modern. But it's very basic, and it's very important to everything that we know about the music that we hear every day. And I'll demonstrate to you that everyone knows about tonality. Some of you might go, oh, I don't remember what tonality is. I'm going to play something, and I'll ask you if you think the music has finished. Has it finished? Yes, it can finish there because it's stable. Has it finished? And if I walked away now? Okay, I have to finish it. Okay. Okay, all right. So that's good. You all know about tonality because you want it to end where it's supposed to end. And you've already set up these expectations of how the pitches are related. And this is very old science. In fact, it dates back to Euler, who came up with this map of pitches. So if you look at this map, there's perfect fifths in the horizontal axis, and these perfect fifths sound like this. Yeah, these kind of sound good, 2 to 3 proportional relations. And if you look at one of the diagonals, they're basically major thirds. 4 to 5 relations. And so these are nice proportional frequency relationships. And this is a map of how tones are related one to another. And if you look at it, for every graph that looks like this, we can create a dual graph. So every area becomes a node, and we connect all the nodes, and you get a hexagonal picture. So this has been known for a very long time, the tone nets, or some call it the harmonic network. And in this map, things that are closely related and sound like they are near to each other perceptually, are close together. So like that triangle is the C major triad, that's the G major triad, that's the F major triad. And so those three triads uniquely define all the pitches you need to make any, that's all the notes in a major key. That's C, G, F. So okay, so we can actually accompany any tune in that key with those three triads. And the minor scales, not to forget them, have these also closely clustered shapes in this space. But if you look at this space and you stare at it long enough, you'll see that there's a letter D here, there's a pitch D, there's another pitch D there. We can wrap it up, and in the old days of transparencies, I didn't ask for the transparency, but if I had that, you could wrap it up and put the Ds over each other, and you get a helix. And once you're in 3D space, you can start using the interior of the space to then explore what is happening with the pitches. So we still have those triangles, those are the triads, and three adjacent triangles uniquely define the pitches you need for a key. So those are the keys. And if you connect all the triads and all the keys, you get nested helices that forms this array of spirals, which I call the spiral array. And you can do the same, not just for the major keys, but also for the minor ones. And so you have this model, which you can then use to find what is the key of any melody or any sequence of pitches that are being played. So here's a major key. It's this cloud of points inside the pitch spiral. And if we have now this tune here, which I will sing and animate in real time as it's mapped to the space, and we compute sort of the region that it takes up, the space it takes up inside this helix. So this is dum, dum, da, dee, da, dee, dum, and so on, yeah? This is simple gifts, and once we've gotten to a point and we want to know what is the key, we can then look for the closest key representation inside that space in the innermost helix, and this is a key finding algorithm. So if we look at it, when we begin, it's in F, that's where it could be F or C because it goes to the dominant area, and then okay, then we are back in F. So the closest key, that's the dark one, F wins at the end, but in the middle, C sort of vies for first place with F. So a series of algorithms have been developed with the spiral array model, and it's documented in this book that came out in 2014. And this model has also been made into a real-time interactive app, which I will show you. I'll show you a video of the app right now. Gosh, this is very small. It's our interactive music analysis system. It automatically takes MIDI information from the keyboard, maps it to pitch names in the structure, and then automatically calculates what's the closest chord and the closest key as the music is unfolding. So this is Bach's Prelude in C major, and I'm going to play just the first chord. Okay, so I've played 3 pitches, C, E, and G, and you see the silver blobs. There's a hidden silver blob here, E, a silver blob, and G, and these indicate the pitches that are sounded, the pitch classes. And this means that the triad of C is the closest triad in this case, and that lights up as a triangle, and the closest key, which is on the helix here, that's the major key helix, the C major key lights up, and it's very close to the triad, so it's rather large. The size of this blob indicating the key, which is also shown out here as the dodecahedron, is proportional to how close we are to that key. We're in the chord of C, in the key of C. Now the chord is D, but we're still in the key of C. G chord in the key of C. C chord in the key of C. A minor chord in the key of C. Okay, so you can see how it's working in real time. And tonality and key establishment as we listen to music is very important to music listening. And composers can play with that, as in, having 2 keys going on at the same time. This is called bitonality. And I'm going to show you how bitonality works. This is an excerpt from a piece called Sampan Variations. And the left hand does this. And the right hand does this. It's one is in F, one is in B. So B is, and F is here. Together they do this. Okay, they don't really normally go together. So. Sorry, I'll do that again. Okay, so you get the idea. It's trying to have 2 possible realities going on at the same time, and you can switch between them. It's kind of like looking at the vase and the 2 faces looking at each other. And so that's an example of how we can play around with tonality. And tonality also allows us to play around with expectation. So this is P.D.Q. Bach, who plays around with, he violates all kinds of expectations. So this is P.D.Q. Bach's take on the Prelude in C by J.S. Bach. So it's not supposed to do that. So it's in the classical style when it began, and it became jazz in the end. So when it does that, you can see in the space where it swings wide all the way down, it goes out of the zone. When it's stably in a safe area of the key, then it's sort of closely clustered, and when it does something weird, it goes way out. We can see that demonstrated here. This is the theme from Paul Schoenfield's trio. that we know how tonality actually behaves, we can use it in the generation of music. And this is a project with a postdoc who's just finished a 2-year fellowship in my lab, Doreen Hermans, where we looked at how pitches are taking up space inside the spiral array. So the diameter of the cloud that the points make, how fast they're moving around, their momentum, and the tensile strain, if this is the key right now, how far you're pulling away from it. So that's called tensile strain. So we can quantify these parameters for something really tense, like the Tristan chord, and these are the tension parameters. And then use that to constrain music generation. And part of the problem with music that's generated by machines, and you'll see a lot of that happening these days with artificial intelligence, is that it lacks structure. It lacks long-term structure. So here we constrain long-term structure by learning and copying structure from existing pieces, looking at repeated patterns, and forcing the new piece to have the same repeated patterns. The problem with the repeated patterns when you put new notes in it is that it doesn't have tonal coherence, and this is where the tension model comes in and enforces tonal coherence. So if you just randomly put in pitches, this is what it's going to sound like, even though rhythmically it's correct. Okay. Not very good. So once you've constrained the tension profile, it becomes quickly and when you start iterating and trying to refine it, it actually doesn't get too much better. So I'm going to play at the banquet tonight. Maybe I'll play you some of those pieces that have been generated by Morpheus, the computer program, and you get to see what it does know and what it doesn't know. It will become apparent very quickly. A model for tonality doesn't just allow us to generate music, which is an application, but it also allows us to understand and formulate ways of modeling existing pieces. So this is Messiaen's Vingt Regards. This is a piece which uses the material from A, B, and C, which have different, if you look at it in the space, they inhabit different parts of the space. And if we look back at it, you can actually hear that happening. This is Messiaen's second wife, Yvonne Loriot, playing it. So that's A. I'll move it forward to. Oops. That's B. So the pitch material is very different. It sounds very different. Yep. So music, even post-tonal music like this, it has structure because it has to have coherence. And if we look at the structure, which is given up there at the top, and we measure the difference and the distances between two consecutive windows in the space, we can actually quantify where the boundaries occur. And this is using different windows, but always where there's a boundary, there's a peak in the difference function. So we're able to track when pitch clusters move about in the space. We can do that not only with tonal parameters, we can do that with timbre, with rhythm, with MFCC measures timbre, the FP measures the rhythm, and the chroma measures pitch patterns. So we can look at different windows and different scales, how these parameters are changing, and then try to explain why people think there are boundaries. So how are we grouping things and thinking groups of chunks of music are actually form a coherent unit. So that's an example of an application of the model. Okay, and now we move on to the second half of the presentation, which has to do with intention and attention. So now we know how this works. The performer actually has a lot to do with enforcing existing structures or negating them. As a performer, you can look at the structures that exist. These are all the keys that exist and where they change. And you can actually outline them as Schnabel does in this performance of the Moonlight Sonata. Can we have it a little bit louder, please? So there's a big arc. He doesn't finish here, he keeps going. Yeah? And he leads you all the way to the first key change at this point. And then it changes again when it goes to the next area here. Not only Schnabel does this is an example from Glenn Gould. This is him playing the Goldberg Variation in 1955. So he's making these big groups and helping us hear that as coherent units. This is Glenn Gould in 1981, where he has had more years to think about this piece and to think about it, and it's in a more complex and interesting way. That's the right hand. Now the left hand. Yeah, so the right hand and left hand are doing asynchronous things, but he's very clearly outlining these structures to us so that we can actually hear it. And this is important. We do this in speaking and talking and helping people chunk ideas. For example, this is an example from Julia Hirschberg at Columbia University, where this example goes, John doesn't drink because he's unhappy, or John doesn't drink because he's unhappy. Okay, they have entirely different meanings depending on how you chunk the words. We indicate these as performers not only through the prosody of the music, we also indicate it when we interact with other performers, for example, through a breath. Right? When you're performing with other people, the breath indicates when you're supposed to come in, and that gives you a cue for when the next beat is supposed to occur. Perceiving structure. So a performer so this is where we come to, the performer actually does this, but what does the listener actually hear? So what the listener hears is out of control of the performer's hands, apart from trying to guide that hearing through these prosodic variations. And we found in some explorations with music that was improvised with a computer, between a human and a computer, that between the improviser and a knowledgeable listener, they listened to the same three improvisations and came up with very different structures of what was happening in the piece. So how can two people listening to the very same recording think of it in such different ways? So if we examine one of them, you can see over here, just at the beginning, the person A thought that A1 was consisted of little a1 and little b1, and the second person thought that it was actually all one chunk, which was part of a much bigger whole. So we found that it depended on what the listener was paying attention to, what their expectations were, also what they called a unit, what they call little a1, really decided how the rest of the analysis was supposed to go. And what was the fourth thing? It's blanking out right now. It'll come back to me. Yes, and the knowledge they had beforehand. So one person was the person who performed the piece, and one person was a listener, knowledgeable, but not the person who played the piece. So when we have an analysis, we try to go back and reverse engineer and say, well, if we say that's the analysis, that's the structure that the person has come up with. But if we just look at the timbre, that little square over there, labeled timbre, is what the structure is if we only looked at timbre. And the next one, that's what the structure would be if we only looked at harmony. And that third one is what the structure would be if we only looked at rhythm, and so on. We can actually reverse engineer this and look at what weighting of these different factors, features, actually gives us the analysis that the person came up with over here. So we can then sort of infer what they might have been paying attention to when they decided on the structure. So this is computed. Well, we've tried different things. This is quadratic programming, but also correlation works. And then trying to reconstruct the analysis from the solution that was formed. So in this way, we're actually trying to get at how people think and take apart music, decompose it into structures and some understanding of the music when they encounter a piece of music. So when we encounter a piece of music, we hear sort of certain structures in it. So this is how different performers, or even the same performer in different times, can come up with different interpretations of the same piece. So from the listener's point of view, there are prosodic features that we hear, and then we impute these structures on what the music would have, and those are the projected structures. And we can compare that with what the structures are in the piece of music to then decide what then the performer is doing with the existing structures. So this is a form of sense-making. One way to explore sense-making is to look at how people practice, right? When people practice music, it's trying to explore in that space what that music is about and what the structures are. So this is an encoding. This is a piece called Practicing Haydn, where my sight reading of a Haydn sonata was transcribed note for note with all the halts and errors. So what might have been going on in my head at that point would be, oh, the pattern's different here. What's going on here? Oh, next, different pattern. What's going on next? I don't like how I did that trill. Let me do that again. Whoops, what's going on? And next. And so on. Yeah, so this is how actually thinking happens when you're encountering a new piece of music. So now, coming to time, in the last 8.5 minutes, time and space. Okay, so what do we manipulate when we actually play music now that we've decided and made some sense of it? We actually manipulate time. And this is what's wonderful about music. We warp time when we are playing. And I'm going to show you how performers warp time. This is how much they deviate from the written time. If they actually played what was written, it would be a straight line at 0.5. It would be a straight horizontal line, but they don't do that. Look, this is how much they stretch time and undo what is written. And this is score time, so you can align different performances and compare them. But we're interested not just in score time, which aligns the score, we're interested in the real time and how it actually unfolds in real time, which you need in order to hear how the performer changes the time. Okay, so this is how much is actually done. This is a fun one from Chrysler playing his own piece. Okay, so that looks very much like this. So, which is why I call these things, where they go up. These are called tipping points. Yeah, that's where you go up to the top and you tip over. And at this point, this is where the performer can decide when to tip over. So this is maybe an aspect of free will, of human volition. And I demonstrated at the beginning with the Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I could have held on to that forever because you would wait for it, but you don't know when I'm going to come back in. Yes, but the music would still continue. And we played around with this early we started on this project in 2002, but this was a paper in 2005 called ESP, where we had a driving interface for driving through a piece of music. You could accelerate with acceleration pedal, and you could also, the acceleration was linked to the loudness, so you could shape phrases with this interface. And you can do this with all kinds of music. This is again back to Schoenfield, and this is from Cafe Music. And he's now back. Yeah? It's often done in cadenzas at the very end before the recapitulation. The performer can take all the time in the world because you know the recap's coming. And you know for sure the recap's coming, which is why they can take all the time in the world. Okay, so this is explained in a paper in Music Perception not long ago. Okay, and finally, the very last example I'm going to give. So where does this manipulation of time and beats comes from? One hypothesis is that it comes from our experience with the human heartbeat, because we have heard the heartbeat from the time we were conceived, not the time when we can hear. And so, well, listening to the normal human heartbeat is not so interesting, as the sinus rhythm is fairly regular. Maybe it might accelerate a bit if you get excited or you're giving a talk, but normally it's just very regular and uninteresting. So here I'm going to show some music encodings of arrhythmic heartbeats. So heartbeats that are not beating regularly, but we can still encode them with music rhythm notation. So this is what this sounds like. Yeah, and it should look like this. Okay, in 7/8, and then 3/4 and 7/8, 5/8. So not quite regular, but a bit like Stravinsky. Yes. And we can put music to this rhythm. And this is a piece of music that is linked to that particular rhythm. It's precisely, exactly that rhythm, and it works. This is another rhythm. This one's a bit slower, not so hyper, and the notation above it. And you can see there's a bit of tempo modulation over there, where it changes from 94 beats per minute to 108, and then back to 94. And if you think of ta, 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 that actually sounds a lot like this Bach piece. Okay, and finally, this is a very fast one. This is the tango. Can we have it louder, please? Okay, I'm actually going to have that louder, please. It's supposed to sound like taiko drums. Okay, and this is the music. Please don't turn that down. Thank you. Okay, so that's the tango. Anyways, that's my latest project. I'll be working on it this July to complete a suite of pieces based on arrhythmic ECGs. And so with that, we've covered the ground of tonal structure, intention, attention, time and space, and various subtopics in between. And just so we bring this back to what we know of music and time and space, and what in antiquity people have thought about music. As I looked around, we started with Euler from the 18th century, and then we moved on to gravity, and that would be sort of the 17th century science. And then actually I found out that a friend pointed out to me that in the 14th and 15th century, academic physicians from the Italian tradition have started writing about the music of pulse and saying that any physician studying the human heart should also study music so that they can understand human heart rhythms better. And that actually dates back before the 14th and 15th century to Boethius in the 6th century, where he described the different categories of music as musica universalis, which is the music of the spheres, musica humana, the music of the human body, and musica instrumentalis, the heard music, music of instruments. So with that, I conclude.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll take a couple of questions. Do we have our microphone people? Who can speak loud enough until the microphone turns up? Con.
Okay. Fantastic talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was curious about what would happen if you had bends. So if I go from, say, A, C, E to A, C sharp, E on a guitar. Imagine I could do that, okay? I'm a lousy guitarist. So you have bends. What happens to the orbifold in the space? Can you actually model bends where you go from a minor chord to a major chord where the third shifts?
Yeah,
Can that be done?
this particular representation is not an orbifold. It's representing classes of pitches. It's not representing frequencies. In the pre-plenary workshop, I showed some work we've done having to do with bends, vibratos, and portamentos glissandi. So transitions between notes, elaborations of notes. So we have done some work with that, but that's not included in this particular model I showed today.
Thank you.
Question over there?
Thank you. This one? This is completely flabbergasting, fantastic conference, and this talk is amazing. So thank you, organizers. My question is the following. What is known about internal or in any which way genetically inherited human comprehension of these rhythms? And I want to relate to the concept that I've heard from the workshop by Chomsky at the beginning of this week, where he mentioned that there, in his understanding, there's maybe 1,000 or few thousand of inherited, innate, concepts that represent internal thoughts. And these internal concepts are actually what distinguishes us from our closest primate relatives, and they are kind of internal thoughts that we operate with and what language is based on. So what you're saying in music, apparently we have this inborn or natural way of understanding the rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yeah,
a question?
That's the question.
So it's basically genetics and musical ability is the question.
As an educator, I like to think that we can influence a lot how much people can understand music and how much musical ability they have. There are some things that are not changeable, such as there's some people who are truly tone deaf and not able to distinguish between going up or going down pitches that are doing that. But that's quite rare. And I think that that's the role of genetics, but that's also the nurture that we give to the person, which can influence how they develop over time. I don't know if that answers your question.
Is there any correlation between human and, let's say, ape ability to perceive these? Has there been any studies on that?
Do animals hear tones?
There's some work with cockatoos. If you go online, there's a dancing cockatoo that can dance to rhythmic music in time to it. That's work of Ani Patel. And he has also, I think, done that similar kind of work with other animals. But I don't know if their ability compares directly with what we know and in the richness and ways in which we interact rhythmically with music.
Okay, and last question, reasonably quick question for a reasonably quick answer. Gentleman in the yellow here.
It's my impression that instrumental performers are often composers and often perform on more than one instrument. But dancers and singers don't seem to me to be comparably composers. Is there a difference in the way the music sits in them?
Oh, I think that would be a question for James, who is a singer.
Well, I'm a singer and a composer, so you can have both. So that's a... Yeah, I mean, does it sit differently? A little bit, because if you're a singer, you sing one line, and composers in general in the Western tradition are composing in keys with transfers. So they learn a different skill very early on, and music is acquired quite early on.
Right. So, I mean, not just singers sing one line. If you play the clarinet, you would only play one note at a time. So there are many instruments for which that is the case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Elaine. So just to explain how dyslexic I am, it is actually Scott Makeig, not Makeig, who is our next speaker. And as I said before, he's going to show us what is going on in our brains when we do things with music.
No, some presence there. Okay, so this is my first time giving a talk without this screen being here. What I do is EEG research at UCSD at the Schwartz Center for Computational Neuroscience. We're turning EEG into a three-dimensional cortical imaging modality. And I'm very much interested in how brain dynamics support our consciousness in all its aspects. So thinking about this, how to give this talk, I came across a quote by Avatar Meher Baba to the effect that all humans have full consciousness of the gross world in all the aspects of knowing, feeling, and willing. And I thought about that, and I realized that that's a very nice dissection of what we mean by consciousness in the ordinary sense. And that is a matter of perceiving and also believing things that we don't ourselves perceive, but we perhaps gain from others or remember from the past. Feeling a sense without a direct, necessarily it can be an internal sense of ourselves or of others without a explicit awareness of what sensory experience perhaps gives us that feeling. And then willing, the experience of agency. I am because I can act. I can act on my environment. I can interact with it. I can interact with others. So these are all aspects of consciousness. And it occurred to me that in the world of cognitive neuroscience and brain imaging, we're working on all these aspects, although some much more than others so far. So how does the brain and nervous system support and sustain human consciousness in all these three aspects? Well, will be the sort of the outline of the talk. Well, the first thing, well, what is the brain doing? And the answer is the brain is extraordinarily complex, much more complex than any of our machines. And in part because the dynamics are inherently multi-scale, both in time and space, but particularly in space. And so if you're going to make electrical recordings, which are very useful as an index of for indexing brain activity, the problem is at each spatial recording scale, the recorded signal from one electrode channel is really the sum of partially coherent distributed activities at the next smaller spatial scale. So the signal is not a signal, it's the sum of signals. So for instance, if you record from a tiny electrode in the boutron of a neuron somehow, you'd record the synchrony in time and space of molecular events. If you record within a cell, you're recording largely the synchrony in time and space of synaptic events across the thousands of synaptic openings in the cell body. If you record extracellularly, you're recording the coherence in time and space of local events in the neighborhood of the electrode, of the neurons, neuronal associated fields and other fields associated in the neighborhood of the electrode. And when you go farther and farther away from the brain itself, with larger and larger electrodes, of course, you are recording the volume conducted sum of activity that reaches the electrode from increasingly large territories in the brain. Now, the reductionist philosophy of science would chase the idea that, well, really what the brain is doing is down there at the membrane potentials, or you can go past there to the molecular level, or you go past there to the quark level, and you go past there as well. Therefore, all the large scale stuff must be just the roar of the crowd and have no functional significance. Well, recently that's been shown not to be correct. There's information sources and sinks between scales. So the small scale certainly informs the large scale, but the large scale also affects actively the smaller scale. So larger scale fields affect the synchrony of spikes that affect, and in turn, distributed network plasticity and dynamics. So, but of course in science, the sociological phenomenon has been what Wilson called scale chauvinism. Everyone likes to work at one scale and say, this is how the brain works, and ignore the others or the connections to the others. Something that's very difficult to get beyond. So EEG was invented or developed first in the 1920s in Germany, Berger. It was treated as a very exotic thing in the 30s. By the 50s, this is the first real-time display of EEG. These light bulbs would twinkle when the alpha rhythm was occurring. They would twinkle at 10 hertz, and you could see something about the scalp pattern. This complexity was reduced to event-related potentials. The average of brain responses here at one channel to a set of equivalent events of some sort. This is called the ERP, the event-related potentials, which are very widely studied still. By 1997, it was certainly possible to use something like MATLAB to make a movie or a still of the actual field across a large number of channels on the scalp. And I would submit now the state of the art is that one can actually, in many cases, determine the actual location of this supporting piece of cortex supporting a particular phenomenon on the scalp to make EEG into real functional brain imaging, with the advantages of recording at the speed of thought and action itself. as opposed to the metabolic brain imaging techniques that record at much slower spatial scales the hemodynamic and metabolic sort of after effects of thought and action. So what is EEG? It's a small portion of the cortical activity in the brain that reaches the scalp in a way that's decipherable, and therefore an even smaller portion of total brain electrical activity. But which portion, how is it triggered, modulated, and what is its functional significance? What functionally relevant brain processes does it, and state changes does it index? The control of EEG itself is known to be very complex. This is a cartoon of the 6 layers of the cortex, the outer bark of the brain. And there are many influences, anatomic influences, system influences on the field properties in cortical, the field dynamics in cortex. And then it has a 6-layer structure, so there's always a source-sink relationship between different layers that may not be able to be seen from outside the head, or perhaps in the future may actually be able to be seen non-invasively. In any event, dynamics at various parts of the brain, not only the rest of the cortex, but subcortical structures affect and create the extraordinary lability that we see in brain activity. So how does EEG work? Scalp EEG, what can you record on the scalp? So Zeynep Kilanchar, my colleague, and I put together an animation using a realistic model. We simulated each square millimeter of the cortical surface being an independent source of potential. So you have 1 million active sources, something on the order of what's called a mini-column. And I asked her to make this activity, which was always ongoing at the same relative strength, to become locally coherent in one region. And then to project onto the scalp what the likely or the expected electrical output of the whole brain is at all these moments. So in this timeline, you'll see the coherence start at 0 in that patch and then rise to complete and then go back again. So what we see is that in the absence of coherence, these million sources are canceling each other out at the scalp, but only when the local coherence at the cortical level on the left is in effect do we get a very large projection, coherent projection to the scalp that doesn't cancel itself out and is seen as an effective source of EEG. So the effective sources of the scalp EEG, therefore, are emergent islands of local cortical field potentials in which the field potentials become locally synchronous or near synchronous. Then the spread of current from the sources to the scalp is very broad. So here on the left is a patch of synchronous activity with its dipolar structure. It has a net projection to the brain, to the scalp, like a small battery with the red and blue indicating positive and negative poles of the battery. And you see the negative and positive scalp potentials. The only channels that wouldn't receive any projection from this one patch would be an equator line, so to speak, of channels. So therefore, all the channels receive almost all the source activity from all the sources where it adds up or cancels out, which makes the EEG problem very difficult. Even here, we see a simulated EEG pattern in which we see all sorts of things going into the front of the head, the back of the head, things moving across the scalp. But these appearances are completely false, and actually this simulation is of 2 patches that don't move at all, but who have simulated activity at different frequencies, and therefore their projections sum or cancel, like a Moire pattern actually mathematically. So although these are the phenomena that we simulated, all this appearance of flows and frontal activity and so on are in fact epiphenomena. So most of what you see in the EEG, if you actually look at it, on the scalp is epiphenomenal. But what is the real phenomena are what's happening in the cortex. And of course, when you have many more of these sources acting, then this is more like what you see if you actually animate EEG. It's a very difficult signal processing problem, and to which the solutions in science labs have been much too simple in many, until now. Of course, computer power is available and modeling is available to cease to focus on what's happening at the channel level, and to go directly to the source level. And the method we discovered some 21 years ago was an algorithm called independent component analysis, in which the sounds that recorded it by microphones at a cocktail party can be separated. And it occurred to me that, well, perhaps we could separate the electrical fluctuations at the scalp, that the potentials arising from different sources. And so it proved to be. A week later, we had the first paper on this, whose conclusions are still extant. So now the three aspects of consciousness. I just put in here, most of the work in psychology has been done with this perception, sensory perception, of course, for this whole field of psychophysics and so on. Experimental psychology has largely had to do with visual perception and also auditory and other sensory modalities. So here's a paper we're putting together as a kind of review in the lab. This is subjects being shown suddenly pictures of faces. And if you average the response to these presentations, you'll get, at 74 channels, you'll get the results shown here in the form of an ERP, applying, which has a quite remarkable negative potential, about 170 milliseconds, known in the field as the N170. That's a sign that I see a face. Here is the scalp pattern of that, and our method, our ICA method, separates two sources out, a left and right, and that can be localized to the inferior temporal lobe, what's called the fusiform face area, just as found by fMRI and other imaging studies. However, if you look at how the EEG, the decomposition of the entire average response, you'll see it's much more complex, and many parts of the brain are activated, or the statistics of the potential flows in many parts of the brain are affected by seeing a face. Okay, so one can learn a lot about sensory perception, although much less has been done in terms of imaginative perception and beliefs. Let's turn to the other aspect of the mind, the feeling aspect of the mind. Here is a review article quite a while ago that took early fMRI studies and noticed that there were two portions of what's called the anterior cingulate cortex in the midline here, in terms of their activity during different tasks. During tasks in which you're asked to make cognitive judgments, like is this picture of outdoors or indoors, or is this square bigger than that square, or whatever. These cognitive judgments produce enhanced blood oxygenation and blood flow in the cognitive aspect of the anterior cingulate, whereas the questions like, well, what do you feel about this? Do you like this scene? Do you like this person? And so on, increases activity in the affective portion of the cingulate, frontal cingulate cortex. And in fact, these are push-pull. So when one is activated, the other is suppressed. So there's these two aspects of our mind and our experience. And this is a meta-analysis of all the aspects of mind that all the hemodynamic information coming from structures that are more active when we ask feeling questions, not only in the limbic system, the amygdala, et cetera, but on all the associated particular portions of cortex that get involved into this affective perception system and cognition system. So Julie Anton and I recorded from 256 channels EEG while subjects were imagining situations in which they would feel different emotions. We gave them guided imagery to suggest situations. They imagined situations, tried to feel it as intensely as possible, pushed a button when they were through, and then the audio instructions would bring up another emotion. So we were left with continuous EEG recordings from 256 channels. This is a very small portion of the results, but a fascinating one. We were able to separate out scalp muscle signals with their characteristic what's called EMG spectrum. We found a class of eye potentials that code for the ocular motor tremor, a very tiny tremor, 50 to 70 hertz, that's involved in maintaining visual experience, and is apparently even more active with eyes closed here. Never measured before, probably. And then we found that various brain sources, these cortical brain sources, affective sources of the EEG, also showed a characteristic mode of fluctuation of power shifts across a very broad band of frequencies from about 30 to 200 or more or higher hertz. Kind of a frisson. These occurred in many places in the brain. And when we looked at how they changed that level of frisson, of high-frequency activity across different emotions, we got a 15-dimensional space, which we projected down to two dimensions here with multidimensional scaling. And what we found is that the emotions arrayed themselves very, very in an orderly fashion. Here are sort of negative strong emotions, here are sort of passive negative emotions, and here are positive emotion states that they imagined each of these. And when you project all those down on a single dimension, this line here, one finds that one can predict almost precisely the valence of the emotion. That is to say, we gave these terms to another group of internet respondents and asked them to rate how positive or negative they were. And the positions on these lines of these dots almost perfectly represent their judgments of people, not in the experiment. So that we found that there is representation in the high frequency EEG of the valence of feeling, are feeling good versus feeling bad. And we looked where that was, and the common sites for that were two places in temporal lobe of the brain. We went to the other imaging literature to see whether this was found already, and we found nothing at the time. But since then, we've found a study involving music. Was this good music, neutral music, or bad music? And a study involving listening to actors speaking. Are they speaking with positive emotion, or are they speaking with negative emotion? So that it is now possible to look very in detail, not only in slow fMRI recordings, but moment to moment in using EEG, and look at the feeling aspect of our experience. So, what about aesthetic feeling? Here, before we were imagining how we would experience a scene. What about our experience of music? Which, of course, is one of the largest industries in the world because it is so satisfying to us. So psychologists talk about a theory of heart. I mean, a theory of mind. How do I infer what another person is thinking? I would point to the importance of a theory of heart. how do we know what each other is feeling? So the brain has a distinct feeling awareness system. And so it answers the question, what is she feeling, or what is he feeling? And of course, this has evolutionarily extreme importance. Knowing what another's feeling is a primary cue and clue to their intended or likely action. So if we don't know what each other is feeling at all, then of course the only safe stance is to be totally isolated. So all of human culture, therefore, is tied to the fact that we can gain clues as to what each other is feeling. Now, here's the psychologist's version of that. Extreme examples where it's fairly easy, except for the acting, to distinguish what stereotyped facial expressions the actor here is using. But typically, we must use much more subtle cues. And in fact, this goes along, this is not beginning in the human form. In the animal world, too, there is a lot of dissembling. There's a lot of reason to dissemble, to hide what you're feeling. And we all know that our cats are quite a mystery to us, but so are humans. In many situations, for many valid reasons, not only poker players and diplomats, but in many situations, it's to our advantage to try to hide our feelings. So that makes the problem of feeling, being in touch with others' feelings, being aware of others' feelings continuously, quite difficult. And yet, that's, again, essential for social relationships. So, in fact, the brain networks and network dynamics supporting this affective perception based on subtle cues are still very little explored. So my thought, and here would be my claim, is that these same brain networks that support awareness of what another is feeling are those that also support our aesthetic senses, of feeling qualities in perceived art, music, dance, etc. So here's a beautiful picture I found on the web. This was from a psychotherapy session with a real couple here. What are they feeling at that moment? I think, to me, this picture has a very strong feeling quality. And yet, when I ask myself, on what basis do I get a concept of what she is feeling? Is it the angle of the eyes, the strain in the lips? Is it the etc.? And what about him? We have many clues that we use and are available to us. Our affective perception system is almost outside of consciousness. We don't know what cues we are using. We have a feeling sense. And yet, of course, we are using cues because we didn't have those feelings before the picture came up. So there is this sort of silent system for judging the feelings of others that is always on. Our feeling awareness system continually asks, what is he or she feeling? Even on perceiving sounds, movements, shapes, colors, it continues to ask, what is he or she feeling? And it's so detached from our sort of objective consciousness and that even the he or she can be completely abstracted. So we ask when we hear a piece of music, such as some beautiful examples that were in the last talk, what is the feeling? What is the feeling perhaps of the performer or the feeling of the composer? What is the feeling that is being conveyed? But essentially it's the feeling, it's the same brain system, I believe, that tries to determine from gestures, from voice prosody, from any cues possible, what what another is feeling in our environment. So I'm engaged in experiments, or I certainly would like to be again, have to find the right partner, to look at how this harmonic web used in Western music and essentially in other music such as Indian music maps onto the space of feelings. So composers use chords like a palette. They go here, they go there, they go elsewhere, and to steer feeling in the music. Of course, they use all the other tools of rhythm and so on. But harmony is harmonic relationships are a very important one. And so I came across 30, 40 years ago, I came across a very interesting treatise by some Frenchman who went to India, who claimed that there's a simple mapping between the common space of our affective judgments, which tend to judge good, bad, active, passive, and maybe strong, weak as a third dimension. There's a simple mapping onto this space that composers are using. I don't have time to play the examples that I have set up here or explain its relationship to just versus equal temper tuning and so on. But I believe there is such a mapping, and there's likely mappings for all the other aspects of aesthetic perception that are used in dance, architecture, art, and the like. So now, what about the third aspect of consciousness, the willing aspect? The feeling of agency, the sense of agency. I exist because I can affect my world. So I have a little poem. Brain processes have evolved and function to optimize the outcomes of the behavior the brain organizes in response to perceived challenges and opportunities. Brains meet the challenge of the moment, every moment. So there's this continual cycle of perception, action, evaluation of the results of action, leading to changes perhaps in perception. And this cycle is ongoing in the brain continually, or in multiple aspects. Here, for instance, is my granddaughter hamming it up for her mother, the photography. Why? Because it's a perceived opportunity for her in some sense. So from the viewpoint of cognitive neuroscience, one would ask, well, how does the brain perceive and categorize the outcomes of behavior? Certainly good and bad the valence is an axis that we've seen is succinctly represented in the brain. How does the brain perceive challenges and opportunities? Well, the brain reward system has been much investigated, yet how the brain associates reward with circumstances or events, and does it so quickly, actually, following the appearance of that cue, is really still unknown. Same with challenges. So certainly the challenges and opportunities of the moment are continually shifting. So for instance, you may have been more interested in some things I was saying than others, and which would explain why your thoughts drifted and sometimes and came back to this talk at other times. So the brain is continually doing this, and therefore its dynamics must be changing continually. That produces the extreme challenge for the cognitive neuroscience in modeling the brain dynamics that we can get with increasing accuracy and definition. So it occurred to me about 10 years ago that in most brain imaging modalities, people have to keep their head still against something very heavy, and lie down in many cases. Even with EEG studies, people are so afraid of muscle activities and eye movements contaminating the signals that they would ask subjects to stare at a fixation point and not to move. So, but however, this is a very artificial limitation, because what does our brains evolved to do? They've evolved to organize and optimize the outcome of our behavior that the brain is organizing. So it occurred to me, well, brain activity in 3D space during natural movements has never been observed or modeled. And I certainly wouldn't start with a ballet dancer, but we were able to define what I think of as a new or evolved brain imaging modality in which one images not only brain dynamics, dynamics of brain activity, but also a very high bandwidth recordings of behavior under natural circumstances in natural spaces, if we'd like. So to record simultaneously during willed interactions, actions, and also social interactions, what the brain does via EEG, what the brain experiences versus sensory scene recording, and what the brain organizes, which are our body and eye movements and other psychophysiological measures. Then, of course, we have a math problem. So you use evolving machine learning and other modeling methods to find, model, and measure non-stationary, context, and intention-related functional relationships among all these data modalities. And a simple example of that involved music. This is Grace Leslie, who was a student with me at UCSD a few years ago. And this is her experiment, and let's see if I can get it to play here. This is from a movie in the 60s. And I don't, we don't hear the sound, unfortunately. But she's listening to a symphony, and her friend is deaf. So she tries to show him what she's feeling in the music by swinging arms in time to the music, conducting it. And then she gets frustrated when he doesn't really get it. It's very hard with these Macs to make movies go without touching it with another finger. So here in our lab was one of our engineers who was listening to some movie music, soundtrack, and trying to indicate to his imagined deaf friend what the music sounded like. And on the lower left here, you see that he was watching an animation of his hand position through a motion capture. So that he was trying to make this swishing white dot, moving white dot, carry the feeling of the music. And we had two conditions where the subjects were doing this fully engaged, and a second condition where they were doing it, but they also had a mental arithmetic problem and memory problem to work on. So we expected them to become much more rote. And we looked at the EEG dynamics associated with it, and we found that there was really one significant difference between those two conditions. When they were more engaged, they had these low-frequency bursts of activity at the beginning of each swing cycle, and where? In the right temporal parietal junction. And when we look in the extensive fMRI brain imaging literature, we find that statements like this TPJ area controls representations of the self and another individual. It predicts the level of emotional awareness of others. So in fact, what was missing from the less engaged condition was in the intention to communicate emotionally to the imagined deaf friend. So it was the will of the subject that was compromised by the dual task of doing the mental arithmetic. So this is all the beginning, I think, of a much deeper exploration and much more complete exploration into the brain, the way our brains support in real time our consciousness in all its aspects, in its knowing, its feeling, and its willing aspects. And so it's an exciting time to come into cognitive neuroscience, and I believe that EEG will have an increasing role to play because of its high time resolution and increasing spatial resolution as well. Thank you.
Excellent, fascinating talk. Thank you very much. We've probably got time for a couple of questions from the audience. You asked one before. Let me ask someone who didn't ask a question. Lady in white just there.
Yes, I wanted to ask the question to the last speaker also, but I think I would ask the same question. This is very, very interesting. In fact, I'm a neuroscientist. I've worked on Alzheimer's disease for almost 20 years, and I published a lot of papers, and my conclusion of the disease was, not conclusion, I can say that my results for past 15, 20 years is at protein level. We have shown, what has been happening. I don't want to go to details because the question will be, I'll stick to the question and not about my research. But in the end, I have seen that what is happening in the brain is almost shrinking to 1/3. And there's a lot of synaptic connection loss in the neurons. And what is the way? So what is the way to get back the memory or hold the memory in these patients? And I found out that either stem cell therapy, but apparently the most amazing part is music therapy. So we have shown that, we have gone to the Alzheimer's centers and we have given, there's a musical healing music tones which have been composed, almost 5,000 tunes have been composed. One of the guru I follow in India. And he has been distributing that to several hospitals and all, so we have given them. So, and experimentally also we have shown that
do you have
how
a question?
Music is helping in synaptic connection. So my question is that, is there any type of specific music you have experimented where there's in children as well as the aged groups, the memory and cognition can be enhanced with music therapy?
I myself have been interested in music therapy, although I believe there's still quite little science behind it. It's the most successful theory, I'm sure, is therapies are I'm sure, developed intuitively by the practitioners. And but I think using methods like this in future, there can be a convergence between the basic neuroscience and then these practical observations of what effective treatments for various mental conditions are. And that would include behavioral therapies, music therapies, stimulation therapies, and other kinds of work that's now ongoing to sort of supersede the era of just dosing the brain with drugs.
Thank you. Let's have one from the right-hand side. This gentleman here in the blue here. Oh, you've got a competition for them. Okay, yeah. Light blue, you.
Sorry. So did you find any deactivation in the areas of default mode network in your study of understanding the feeling aspect of consciousness?
That's very interesting. In fact, we didn't study that, but now that we're looking at resting data, we find very, very clear sources in the brain, networks of sources in the brain that conform to the default mode networks seen in the brain in the fMRI data. And so that's something that is definitely open for close examination now with these methods.
And one last question from this gentleman here.
Thank you for your talk. That was wonderful. I like that you defined consciousness at the start. It really gave us a way to map and then to understand when you're talking about just dimensions of music that you found in the tonal mapping. So you said that potentially, you mentioned a study from previously that had 3D mapping of good and bad. Was it arousal and then strong and weak? That's pretty common in a lot of...
Yes, that was the semantic differential of Osgood in the 50s.
Right, okay.
Yes.
So my background is in personality psychology, and it's very dimensional. There's values that map onto that as well. And I wonder if in your definition of consciousness, are we approaching a point where we can say, okay, maybe there's a conceptual space that's common to all definitions of consciousness?
Well, I don't know exactly what you mean by that. I organized my talk about one suggestion of a kind of a triumvirate of aspects of ordinary consciousness, which might be a useful way to organize thinking about it. But I wouldn't go beyond that to
we talk about physics a lot. There's a lot of physics presentations, so...
Well, and then there's a lot of metaphysics as well. So
Yeah.
Neither of those am I expert at.
Right.
Okay, I think we're going to have to stop it there. So, I have a couple of announcements to make. Oh, we should clap you. Thank you very much for the talk again.